Good morning, friends. This is once again your President, Mr. Raghavinder Das. I had finished my introduction on an individual platter in my earlier video. Now I would like to share how this association, All India Cantonment Bungalow Owners Association, came into incarnation. After receiving my Honorable High Court's notice during the pendency of the actual hearing or argument in the court, I took out time with Major Deepak Chauhan and started taking cantonment classes with him. Every morning I used to visit Mr. Deepak on a cup of tea, and we used to vet the laws which he used to make me understand, and we further gradually moved ahead because I had to be educated on a particular level before I could talk on cantonment laws. This discussion and training period of mine was a boom to me, and I could understand what these laws actually meant. During this period, I used to keep pestering Major Chauhan and Mr. Deepak to give me these books which they had garnered, and after a lot of persuasion, I finally could lay hands on some set of books which they had dug in. My first lesson on this was that nothing comes free for you. Either you pay for it or you go for it. So I had to not only just pay for it, I had to even go for it. With this learning, myself and Mr. Deepak, we decided to have a local meeting with our president, Mr. late Rajkumar, and his team of Mr. Sandeep Jain and Pradeep Jain. It was a marathon meeting, and we discussed in length what actually Major Chauhan was wanting us to do or learn. The outcome of this meeting after a marathon discussion was, I'm sorry to say, was not as expected. Instead, my president rose up to say that if we bungalow owners have to or residents have to fight, we will have to do it individually, and nobody can do it for them. We cannot fight jointly, which did not hamper my urge to take this forward. My fellow friend Mr. Deepak, who had already shared some of my research material or some of my documents with the team, I became reluctant of this sharing if the outcome was not as per our desire. My desire was not to fight individually. My desire was that what happened with me in 2003 should not be happening with anybody. This period from 2003 till 2009, I'm talking now when we were in 2009, had already given me a lot of education on this subject, and I had dug into a lot of documents. So once this marathon meeting with the local president ended, we decided that they were least interested to file a status quo case on the General Land Register, which was not maintained as per the documents and as per the law of the land. After this, I again pursued my second step. I started visiting DC record rooms. I visited the law record room prior to 1985. I laid hands on registries from 1835. I got a lot of judgments of 1870 from these record rooms. When I used to read these judgments, there was so much to read that I even got a judgment where the cantonment magistrate was giving a statement that there were 6 types of grants in these cantonments. We kept these documents and we kept moving forward. Once we were aware that our local team was not going to assist us on any matter or will support us for this cause, I decided and talked to Mr. Deepak that why can't we talk to 57 cantonments plus 5 which came after independence, and make an association. Since in 2008 we had already started the RTI activism of writing letters to most of the cantonments and DOs, where we laid hands on the various occupants as per the GLR and as per the tax register from the cantonment boards. We could differentiate who was the HOR and who was the illegal occupant. It made me easier to talk to these people and bring them on a platter with my education. Friends, after doing this research in Ambala Cantonment, I decided to take my research to the next level. Myself and Mr. Deepak met Kumari Shelja, who was at that time the Union Minister and was holding charge of the Archives Department and was the MP from Ambala Cantonment. She supported us with the recommendation letter which made us visit most of these various libraries in the state of India. We visited the National Library, Calcutta, the Lala Lajpat Library at Chandigarh. We even sat down at Archives Library, National Museum in Delhi. We were even given the charge to see the documents in the Archives Library of Punjab at Chandigarh and a document of land section maintained in Jalandhar. I happened to visit Shimla Library, where all the second capital of India had documents starting from all these speeches on various subjects in the library. I even laid hands to the Survey of India office in Dehradun, where I saw from 1902 all cantonment maps are lying, which even had names of people who were occupying these bungalows. One of us even visited the London Archives Library and dug into the various Governor General orders lying in those libraries. During this period, we laid hands on not only the acts and laws, we even laid hands on various gazetteers of these cantonments, from Ambala to Jalandhar to Amritsar Gazetteer to Jhansi Gazetteer. So these gazetteers were of a great support. They were telling us about the cantonment itself. This is how our research was growing at a different pace and a level, that by 2010, we were self-contained, that we had so much of material that we could move forward, and Mr. Das decided that let's create a data bank and make this evidence in such a form that the law of the land interprets it the way it was written by the Britishers. I can simply say that not an inch the British Army acquired within these cantonments, not an inch they ever wanted to resume in these cantonments during their regime. They always were honest and they purchased these bungalows from residents, whether it was an army officer of their era or it was a civilian of Indian origin who was basically called a native. Within this period also of my research, which I had already said that my pendency of the RSA, which I inherited from my father after 30 years, was also coming on platter, and I very easily understood now that these laws cannot be interpreted by our present advocates sitting in various courts, because the law which we study when we are doing law is the general law or the constitutional law. These are special acts which were made for the cantonments and were never brought to the platter of a general law. Just to name, most of the people have not heard about House Accommodation Act. People have not heard about Rape Act. This is called the Acquisition of Immovable Properties, which is still applicable as on date in cantonments in India. After laying these hands on records, I started compiling the Ambala judicial records and files which I had dug in from the judicial record rooms, I had laid a hand on a Srand Brigade diary, which very clearly told me the natives' name of Ambala Cantonment who were owning these bungalows at that time, which was way back in 1902. Gradually, when I started checking into the various sale deeds which I had dug in, that some of them had a chain, but some were missing with that chain. So that is what I had requested my president in 2009, that why not we file a suit for the redemption of the General Land Register, which had not been made as per the rules. So that was a story to be told. I would move on to the next, that now we were convinced that we should make an association and the name should be All India. After meeting the departmental people, we were told if you want the suffix All India, we have to have minimum 7 states representing the association. As Mr. Das had already got and was in touch with most of the bungalow owners and residents in various cantonments, we were able to create and decide that we will name our association All India Cantonment Bungalow Owners Association. On 2nd May 2009, our first board meeting was conducted at the office of All India Cantonment Bungalow Owners Association, which was 102 The Mall, Ambala, Cant. 20th May 2009, we were given the certificate of registration by this name. And I would like to share, on 15th May 2012, by the core of the representation, we changed our name to All India Cantonment Bungalow cum Resident Owners Association, so that people from civil area could also merge into this association itself. After our first board meeting, I still remember our first members were myself, Raghvinder Das, Mr. Deepak Agarwal, Mr. Rishi Patni, Mr. Rishabh Mittal, Mr. Jasprit Singh Desi, and Mrs. Savita Das, who represented Ambala, or you could say Haryana. We had Mr. Vivek Sood, who represented Mumbai Cantonment and State Maharashtra. We had Mr. Gopal Narayan, Mr. Rajiv Tiwari from Agra, who represented Uttar Pradesh. Colonel Harminder Singh came from Landore Cantonment, who represented Uttarakhand state. We had Mr. Sandeep Jain from Jalandhar Cantonment, who represented Punjab. We had Mr. Vikas Sood from Kasauli Cantonment, who represented Himachal Pradesh. In this way, this association was created, and now Mr. Das and Mr. Deepak, along with Mr. Rishi Patni, decided to take tours to various cantonments of 57 which we inherited from the British and 5 which came after post-independence. Mr. Das yet remembers that our first tour was on 5th June 2009 towards Agra Cantonment, and this was the path changer. What a welcome we were given by Mr. Gopal Narayan and Mr. Rajiv Tiwari's team, that we were spellbound to the response that people were awaiting. Mr. Das, I used to take seminars on various topics. I used to teach people on various documents of the cantonments, and I was quite surprised that people did not understand what General Land Register meant. They had never seen a General Land Register. Later, we took a tour somewhere in September 2019 to Jhansi Cantonment. We had a rousing welcome. Mr. Judev and Mr. Fokela were our host. We reached from there to Sagar Cantonment, where Mr. Sudhanshu was an excellent host, and we had these seminars being conducted. From there, we moved to Jabalpur, where we had a slight experience which is not to be stated, but finally we ended meeting people like Mr. Sanyal, who had won their resumption notices way back in 1990. We later came down to Nagpur, where there is Kamti Cantonment. We had a rousing welcome. Even the member parliament of the cantonment was present in the meeting which was conducted by Mr. Das. Later, we took tours to various other cantonments in our vicinity and our distances, and Mr. Das used to conduct seminars. Later, we came across Mr. Bhojwani from Pune cantonment, who happened to be Mr. Das' Rotary friend because of his father being a Rotary governor. After meeting Mr. Bhojwani, there was no looking behind. He was a man who motivated this association to a very next level. And we created history. That in 2012, we decided to hold a convention in Delhi with a representation of more than 500 people, about 27 cantonments physically present in the Parliament Library, in the convention hall of the Constitution Club. It was a 2-day seminar. Kumari Shelja was our chief guest. Mr. Pallam Raju was our MOS later. And we gave a representation to the Defence Minister in the Parliament House, along with Pallam Raju, with a representation from the Defence Estate Office, Delhi, and the Quartermaster General, India, even sitting. This association was growing, and we garnered at that time, because of our charter, we had some number of individual members who made this association spread like a cobweb. And even there were about 12 cantonments who decided to become life members of this association. And we decided on our charter, which is on the website, that people should understand why we need this association and what is the cause behind this association. I yet remember there was a resident, Mr. Ashok Sachdeva from Amritsar. I must mention him individually. On meeting, he visited the All India Bungalow Owners Association office at 102 Mall, Ambala, Cant, and he was so impressed with the documentation and the data which we had assimilated that we were given a handshake of representation with Mr. Anthony, where we discussed at length on a 101 basis, where 30 cantonments, their representative travelled all the way to Delhi, and we met him jointly. I would like to name people during this course of making association, people like Mr. Indu Rakhya from Jabalpur. He was a personality to be talked to. Mr. Wahal from Kamti Cantonment. I would consider him a very knowledgeable man. I even remember a man from Mau, Mr. Basani, who had fought a public interest litigation and had taken an order that Mau Cantonment was never a part of the British regime, and it was a foreign territory under the Holkar estate. I had been talking to these people for hours in length on telephones and other people in the cantonments so that we could gel and know each other's problem. I even remember when I met Mr. Dinesh Tandon, the late son of Mr. Purushottam Das Tandon in Supreme Court, along with Mr. Deepak, how he was fighting his second battle of the case. We in Pune Cantonment met Mr. Tamu, the son of late Mr. P.T. Ankleshia, the man who had taken a judgment of remanding back his resumption notice from the Supreme Court. These happenings which were working on till 2012, when the association created history, there was something which was at the back happening, that Mr. Das, who was the pioneer or the president in doing this, the army pulled up its sleeves against him. And during this period of 2011, he had lost his case in the Honorable High Court of Resumption on the grounds of admission deed, because his father could not fight or plead during the lower court cases. With this happening, Mr. Das had decided not to file the SLP, and he volunteered with the department because the second part of the judgment was very clear to compensate him on market value. But the army, instead of letting the Defence Estate Office do its executive work, after this convention on 5th August 2012, on 13th September 2012, Mr. Das was thrown out with his family of a wife and 2 daughters and mother, Mrs. Savita Das, of his bungalow, and he was made homeless just because he was educating people all over the cantonment. Friends, I will continue this discussion to a next level in my coming video. For now, I thank you for listening to me. Good day.